So, welcome everyone.
Yes, sir. Welcome back to the
I hope
most
you-
electrifying podcast on the planet, baby.
I don't
You
know.
what it is.
I don't know about electrifying, bro. Electro.
Hey,
Woo! You see,
we have a
people
live
cheering.
audience at the back.
We've got-
Private back here.
We have a live audience
Yeah.
at the back, bro. It's
I'm
crazy.
telling you, we have a lot of people already. We have more people watching it behind than,
Hey, yo, what's up, guys? What's
than
up,
on
guys?
YouTube.
How y'all doing? How y'all doing?
Please, for real, subscribe and like. It helps the algorithm.
Yes, sir.
Please, let's have more than 11 subscribers. So thank
Yes,
you.
sir. Thank you so
Anyways,
much.
racism is a very sensitive topic for most people, and don't worry, I'm not trying to guilt trip anybody here. But everybody talks about like racism. Everybody talks about like how there was like slave trade and people, certain countries conquered the world, blah blah blah,
Yeah.
and subjugated the others. But nobody really talks about the aftermath after slave trade was abolished, stuff like that.
Like the effects of it.
Yeah, because after that we had colonialism, and one thing I often hear is like, so Americans, sometimes there's this divide between African Americans and Africans. They're like, oh my God, we went through slave trade, y'all didn't go through anything. It's like, yo, colonialism was its own beast,
Exactly.
and it's had a lot of crazy effects over the years.
Indeed.
But who better to invite for this than
Someone who
Someone
plays
who-
for the same boat.
someone who plays for both sides? We've invited one of our friends. You know, he grew up in Kenya, and he can give us the East African perspective. You know, we're both West African, so anything we say is just going to be biased to West Africa and our experiences there. But just for balance, we've invited someone from East Africa.
Yes,
And
sir.
we want to welcome our friend.
Let's go. Let's
Go.
go. Woo! My guy.
Welcome, Hidde.
Welcome, man.
How good does it feel to be on the podcast?
Honestly, it's been an honor.
Oh my God, this guy came in with the
It's,
most Kenyan accent.
Thank you guys for having me. It's,
Appreciate
yeah.
you coming.
Me being half Kenyan, half Dutch, I give you both sides.
Fair enough. We'll try not
So
to guilt
messed
trip your Dutch side too much.
Damn, bro.
Anyways, yeah, so let's get right into it. We said like colonialism exists, right? And first of all, can you just tell us a bit about like colonialism in East Africa? Just like general first.
I think
From what you know.
what I know is like one big difference is we got a lot of Indian people in East Africa, but that's because the British brought those over.
I see.
And I think in West Africa, you guys don't really have that, right?
Yeah, I think even in South Africa, there were people that are from India.
It's the second biggest Indian population.
Yeah,
bro. If
like-
India disappears,
Yeah, well, if India disappears, they're gonna appear in South Africa.
bro, yeah, man.
Yeah, like I saw the whole Gandhi movie, and I didn't know he grew up in SA in South Africa.
Oh, he did?
Yeah,
Wow, I didn't know that.
but one of the main effects I think colonialism had is that after colonialism left, there were still a lot of people who were stuck with like the colonial mindset. And in your opinion, what do you think colonial mentality is?
Ooh, I think it's probably the worshipping, man.
Yeah.
Man, like for example, I think my dad, bro, that guy loves country music, man. He loves the pound. No. It's a
Pops,
different
bro.
it's a different generation, man. Even right now, like I think like a lot of like I don't know, we've been to the like now in the Netherlands, for example, see it's not that great, it's not amazing, but back in Africa, man, Europe is the way to go, man.
Yeah.
Like, there's some people, maybe there's some people that think, there's some guys, their life dream is just come to Europe. It's like, okay, like come and do what, It's not as if,
Yeah, the biggest thing, when you go to the beach and something like that, and you see like some old white guy, and then they're chilling with a young, beautiful black girl and stuff like that, and you say, oh, that's all for the money, man.
Yeah,
Like
100%.
love is fake, man. Love is a bank account these days
Hey.
back there, man. It's
That's the kind of worms, bro. I don't know if I'll open that.
Indeed, but don't you also think that I think the media also has a bit of a part to play in this as well, with how, because I think most of the movies and most of the shows that people watch back home growing up was mostly TV shows from America and from UK, and that kind of have an effect on Africans maybe seeing, the other side as better or more advanced.
Okay.
So they kind of worship them in a way.
Okay, I think the media plays a part, especially even social media, because the whole premise of media is presenting things in the best light. So in terms of just how it is, so this, for example, this area, for example, could be presented like as a very luxurious area with the right camera and the right director and all this stuff. And Instagram too, for example, what do people post? People post like the best stuff, highlights, right? They don't post like the bad parts. And people who are like African countries might see that and be like, oh my god, that is. But what I'm talking about, I think, started way before social media and even before like mass media was a thing. Like, I think colonial mentality has been a thing since 60s, 70s, 1960s, 1970s. There was even one song once made by a musician called Fela Kuti. I don't know if you both know him.
Yeah, he's a legend.
But
I don't know.
his song is colonial mentality. Maybe you might play the beat in the background. I don't know. But in the song he was talking about how there was there was like slave trade and all this colonialism, but even though they're gone, even though the colonial countries were gone from these countries, the people were still stuck with the colonial mindset. And in that song he was giving examples of how like there's some people, they wouldn't want to buy like African clothes. They want to buy clothes that were made in UK or made in America, and that still exists till today. That is what I think is one example of colonial mentality. But another example I would say is bleaching, man, bro. Like, first of all, what do you all think about bleaching?
Man.
I mean,
Look, I ain't gonna call anyone out, but I think there are definitely some countries where bleaching is very, very popular. I would say for sure some countries in West Africa, I've noticed mostly, now this is just my observation, right? Mostly the French-speaking countries, most of the Africans I've seen, they're mostly bleach their skin. But to me, I believe it's a negative thing. Like, why would you want to bleach your skin? Is it that you want to make yourself feel, or you hate yourself, or you hate how you look? Like, to me, I think it's a bad thing. I wouldn't support anyone who would like to do that, but anyway, it is what it is.
But it's not even Africa. Like, for example, in Asia, it's also, I think it's even crazier there, man.
Yeah.
I think like I landed in once, and I think it was Bangkok. I've never seen so many like bleaching or like, you know, white beauty fucking billboards. But yeah, like white billboards and all that fucking shit, bro. It was insane, man. It's like, I know in Africa it's also a problem. Like, your light skin, even like, for example, if you're like a bit lighter than like your darkness and all that stuff, bro. Everybody's like, oh my god, yeah, you're white and shit, and then it's like attractiveness and stuff like that. I think it's backwards. Even I got a lot of points back then, man.
yeah, I was gonna say this guy's getting all the girls.
No, I didn't get, but I know I got extra points for being light skinned and stuff like that. Here I'm Moroccan back.
I can also remember growing up and stuff, and when I would go play like in the sun, like I would spend the whole day, and then some of my friends would be like, you look so darker than you were in this morning. It's like, bro, like, what does it have to do with anything? You know, like, I was just playing. Like, it doesn't really make any sense.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of a lot of things. One is like, of course, media programming. If all the people that they are watching seem more attractive, and if like during the 60s, 70s, or I don't know, 50s, white folks had it better, or white countries seem to have it better, then of course I guess people who were in those scenarios saw themselves as like, the closer you are to white, the better life will be for you.
But it's the same thing. For example, in Africa, every time you see like a white person, man, that guy's on holiday, that guy's balling money and stuff like that, man.
Yeah, they
like,
never come across regular folks.
No, they're always successful, they're always this and that, man. And then I was like, someone who's just chilling there is like, oh my god, man, look at how successful these white people is.
Yeah.
Must be something wrong. What's the difference between me and you, bro?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm
and the
black,
easiest
you're
thing
white.
is skin color. But it's interesting that you mentioned Asia, because Asia, whilst Asia wasn't completely, the whole of Asia wasn't completely colonized, there was also colonization in Asia. But colonization didn't have to happen physically for people to be mentally colonized. I guess there was a point in the world where people just felt like, well, white folks have it best, so like closer you are to white folks. And it's kind of depressing, but that is, in a nutshell, is colonial mentality, where people are trying to get to whiteness as close as possible, even though the construct of whiteness only existed in the 1900s. Like, prior to that, everyone was from like either Germany or like Slavics or like people from the previous past Roman Empire, whatever.
That man, I think like the paleness. I think it usually also comes from the royal family never really worked in the fields and stuff
Yeah.
like that, so they were always like pale and all
Yeah.
that. But then, in like for example, I think the same thing happened in Asia where the royalty didn't work in the field. That's why they were so pale. But then, when everything became like globalized, all of a sudden, oh look at all these German people, man, they don't work in the field. And the truth is, it's just like I don't know why I said German. I think you said Germanic, and then
Yeah,
I'm still
Germanic.
stuck with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But do you guys feel like the tide is changing like nowadays, or do you think it's improving, or it's still the same?
In the Western countries, yeah, but back home, nah, man.
So, yeah, in Western countries, there's a bit like been efforts to like decolonize, like that colonization mentality.
Yeah.
There've been efforts to reduce it, and especially from the people who live. Let's say maybe their grandparents were from, I don't know, Nigeria or Suriname. There've been efforts to change that mentality around like, oh, like if your white life is good for you. Now it's more about like if let's say you were born in a European country,
Yeah.
you might have access to a higher quality of life rather than your skin color per se. Even though that's still a topic on its own for some people. But here's what though, like in African countries, or like let's say Nigeria for example, I don't want to just be using Africa as a whole easily, like otherwise we're doing basically the same thing like people who say like, oh, what does this mean in African? Like, bro, there's no one language. It's like it's a whole continent.
Yeah.
And in Nigeria, for example, I know for sure growing up that I felt like damn, like some people their mind is so conditioned to think that just like if it's white, it's right. That's my god. That sounds like some KKK.
I was waiting for the saying. If
I
it's
was like-
white, it's right.
That was like from KKK shit, man. But really, it's kind of sad because I saw there are people who would bleach their skin. There are people who would avoid the sun, bro.
Same.
There are people who avoid the sun just because they didn't want to get darker. There's folks who, for example, would try to relax their hair flat so they could have. And I'll be honest, like in secondary school, there was a time where, as teenagers, we were just curious, so we did it. We were trying to get waves. I don't know if you remember, but like waves was a popular
Waves
thing.
were back then.
And it was like something about if you relax your hair for like 10 minutes, you get waves. But there were some people who, like, these people were old. They would try to relax their hair like flat
To the point
so
where
they
it's
can do like the slick back or like.
like,
It's like, bro,
nah, definitely.
no amount of slick back will make you look white, bro. Like, and why would you want to do that? I think it was something that people are running away from embracing the beauty and what they are. Stuff like people laughing at other people because they have big nose or big lips. It's like, bro, those are our features, and it's a bit messed up or it's just colonial mentality when people try to only equate beauty to being like having a very thin nose and having very thin lips or eyes or whatever, when it is possible to look good in any feature. Like a beautiful Nigerian woman doesn't have to look like a beautiful let's say German
European,
woman,
yeah.
or a beautiful Chinese woman doesn't. And people from all these countries have very beautiful people that don't look alike. So anyone that's trying to fit, just trying their best to squeeze in to the Eurocentric idea of beauty is just colonial mentality,
Nah,
bro.
I definitely agree. I would say for sure as well. Growing up, I think colorism is also something that is pretty rampant in African countries as well. Like especially in Nigeria, I remember like in school and stuff. Like there'll be people or kids, let's say, who were on the lighter section or on the lighter. Feel like him.
Nah, don't.
That honestly, like when it came to, let's say, if two kids of different skin colors did the same stuff, sometimes it felt like the kid with the lighter skin gets a little bit less, or they get pardoned a little bit further.
Reminded me of the harassment / flirting meme. But here's what though. So what you just mentioned, it's crazy how in some African countries, like I know Nigeria for sure, so I'm gonna ask you about East Africa, but in Nigeria for sure, there were schools where, like, the regular folks, like me, you, we have to shave our head, right? But if a kid was mixed or if it was a white guy, for sure, they can grow their hair long.
Yeah.
And I remember asking, before you go, I remember asking once, I said, why is this the case? And they literally said their hair is fine. Bro. And that is so dumb because we are, like, our curls are just tighter. It's, if you stretch it out, it's the same thing. Well, our curls are tighter. And it's tighter for a reason. It's our climate.
No, but it's definitely right, man. Like, I don't know where it was, but I noticed there was some. I went to I went to a British school, right? So that's why I sound like this. But in Kenya, yeah.
I sound like this because of YouTube.
But then there was this local school I used to go. Like, I play football there, and then I think they had some light-skinned people there as well, man. And those people got like special treatments as well, man. So it is even in like the institute setup, man. It's messed up.
Yeah.
But I don't know how far it goes back, man, because this thing it's crazy.
I think it's going back far a long time. Like, you know, as I was saying, if someone was making a song about this in 1960, 1970, then, you know, people have been doing it way before social media, way before mass media. What are you gonna say?
No. But even if you look at, for example, some of the conflicts that happened, man. Like, for example, I also was in Ethiopia for a bit, man, and some Ethiopians don't consider themselves to be Africans.
Yeah.
Because they're still like Africans, but they're just like a different shade.
Yeah, because they didn't.
Stuff like that.
Yeah.
They get colonized, but then they say, so actually our features, man, we're not African like you.
Yeah, but here's what that's messed up because of the whole branding that colonialism did, which was just, you know, we don't need to go too much in depth, but there's so much inhumane treatment.
No, but even the difference between like the Tutsi and the Hutus, the Rwandan genocide, man. The Tutsis at some point, the Tutsis were like described a bit differently. I'm not like, you should fact check me 100%, man. But then they were like, we have more like European features, so we're a tad different.
Yeah, so I was gonna get to that. I was gonna say that where I was going with that was that because of the whole branding of how the West African human was treated with all the subjugation, all the slave trade, all the etc. was a few, let's say 100, 200 years of bad press, of bad imagery. You know, even in the American, what do you call it, encyclopedias, they used to describe West Africans as barbaric, low IQ, sex craved. You know, some of those stereotypes actually still have
Sort of
undertones till today.
Yeah.
But here's what
The BBC and
East
that.
Africans were trying. East Africans were, I don't know.
That was out of pocket.
No. But for example, like, why is the Congo War called the Silent War, man? Because the truth is, the Western world did not care about. You know, there were 2 African wars in Congo, bro, that everybody was fighting about. Nobody knows about this shit because everybody's like, nah, man. It didn't happen outside Africa, man. We shouldn't give a shit.
If it doesn't evolve.
Yeah, but even like, for example, now the like Rwandans and Ugandans are like taking minerals from Congo. Nobody cares about it. Sudan, why is it so quiet right now?
Yeah.
What happened to the coups after in Niger, Burkina Faso, Mali?
Yeah, dude, it's
quiet, man.
It's definitely quiet. All of this is going to the point I was trying to make, that like, because it's only concerns only Africans, like, because it's only, even though the people who are going to benefit in the long run will be like Western countries, because Congo, you know, cobalt, stuff that's necessary for the Tesla batteries, for example, for the phones we use.
But we still have it though, right?
Yeah, we still have it.
In other words, they're still getting money, but
Yeah.
the media doesn't care. Nobody really cares about it, which is it's sad, but
Yeah.
the way it is, man. But even like African news,
Well,
man.
you could tell when like the whole Ukraine stuff happened.
No, but it's like still highlighting African news, man. So African news is still focusing on Western news in the first place. Man.
Oh,
It's
I see what you
insane,
mean.
man.
I see what you mean.
Because
Yeah,
African
that's
news,
insane.
like how often like we
That's
think
insane.
about local, but we don't think. And why
Yeah.
the hell do you need a visa from, I don't know, Nigeria to go to Kenya,
Kenya,
man?
yeah.
And then you don't need one when you're from Europe. But that thing is wild, man.
That's another, like,
Another point, right?
that's another example of colonial mentality, bro. Because why do you need a visa to go to Nigeria, from Kenya to Nigeria? But say a Dutch person or maybe some countries, people can just arrive and they get like.
To be fair, I think the Kenyan president or the government actually made a I think I saw it on LinkedIn or something.
Oh,
I'm not sure if it's real, but they made a press where they were saying they were going to open the borders to all African countries. I'm not sure, but is that true?
It's true, but there are like still strings attached, man. There's still payment fee. There's still you need an invitation letter, so it's not like perfect. So for Western countries, like you don't need a visa, so tourism goes up. But which tourists do Kenyans want? We want the rich ones from the Western countries and all these other ones. Like it's still messed up.
Yeah,
He said a great thing, but I just think he's just trying to create a better Western image. Like why? Like he also wanted to help people in Haiti, man. Like why are we sending Kenyan troops to Haiti? Like I get it, right? Like we want to help them. 100% they need help and all that stuff, man. But Kenya, we have like our own corruption with like police and all this stuff. So now we're sending our corrupt police to Haiti, man. Bro, I swear, you know when you like corruption, like I know it's bad, but sometimes it helps you out, man. Like when you get stopped at a light or something.
Yeah.
I don't know if the same in Nigeria, man. You see a policeman, first thing you go for the skinny one, man. You don't go for the big one. The big policeman, man. Those are expensive, man.
Those are expensive
you go
ones. You go for a little boy.
You go for the little one, the skinny one, bro, and then you just say, yo, man, just give him a high five with some money in there, bro. And then you continue on your way, man.
No, it's definitely crazy because that's something I've always thought about. Like, why do I have to get a visa to go to South Africa or something, or to go to Kenya, for example, when pretty much in Europe you could literally just walk to Belgium or walk to Germany,
but that also has its downsides. 100%.
The open borders, yeah, I get that.
But even for them, for example, for a European to come to Kenya, bro, it's so bloody easy, man. No paperwork, nothing. Anyone else, like any African trying to come to another African country, either other than when they have like special agreements. Yeah. Usually, man, it's so much harder.
Yeah, man, that's 100% down to colonialism, bro. Because a lot of these countries, even you'll find that in Kenya, in Nigeria, there were companies that were set up just before independence that are basically almost as if they're above the law. They're like older than the countries themselves. Because, yeah, because they're just set up. Please, let's not mention Shell because
but it's true though. Like the shit they did in River State in Nigeria or Delta, it's crazy.
Yeah. Well, you know, a lot of these companies, they are basically above the law because they were set up in very colonial times. Also, I was gonna say that. So I was saying, why do Ethiopians, etc., not consider themselves Africans? Because they're trying to. Because you already.
One thing, it's not all, man. It's like a small fragment.
Okay, it's not all of them, but you know, sometimes some Ethiopians, some Somalians, they're not Africans.
Yeah, but
and okay, I have a question for you.
If that is the case with some people, I think for those people, it's that they're trying to distance themselves as much from the stereotypical image of the African.
But because
they think that has been abused too much, that if they can separate themselves from it, then they can have their own self-esteem, or they can have, you know, they're trying to work around being attached to that image.
Okay, if in that case, right, what would you say then about the Northern Africans? Like, would you consider them Africans when compared to like the Ethiopians and Somalians or something?
Wait, I'm gonna cut this out. Is this on?
Yeah, it's on. That's cool. It's cool.
Can you say that again? Sorry.
Yeah. So, okay, you just said something about the Ethiopians and Somalians, right? What about the people from North Africa? So, like the Egyptians, the Tunisians. Would you consider them Africans, or just Africans by living on the continent, or not Africans like in terms of the genetics and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think a great example for this, if you watch AFCON, man, nobody's for, like, all the people under the Sahel, bro, are not for the northern countries, man. Like, we want the real ones to win, right? We don't want, like for example, World Cup, Morocco, Africa, no word. But when it comes to AFCON, bro,
you want the real ones to win?
Yeah, man, I'm for Zimbabwe, Congo, one of those two, man. If Kenya is not there, I'm for them, 100%. But for example, like, to clarify the Ethiopian thing, it's not all, it's like a few of them, like not like, for example, when we were in Ethiopia, my aunt was walking around and she's like, Kenyan, much darker than me and stuff like that, man. And then they call her African for some weird reason, even though she is African, but so are people in Ethiopia. And I don't really understand I think because they never got colonized, and they have, I think, massive propaganda in that country as well. So they have the view that, they're better. Yeah, they don't have the same problem, even though they still have war, famine, and all these other stuff.
A lot of these countries, not even about success because they're as countries they're not even some of them don't even have as high GDPs as let's say like Nigeria or anything, but it's just down to trying to distance themselves from the image of the African, which has been downtrodden over the years. You find that this same thing we just mentioned about Ethiopians, for example, and Somalians, sure they're darker skinned, but the same mentality they have is so similar to like Morocco, Algeria, all those Nordic, North African countries, because they are trying to be like, oh, like we're African born, we're not that African, you know?
Yeah, I have a question for you guys then on the same topic. But do you think then Africans have their own identity, or they were given by the colonialists their identity?
I think it's a mix of where we are is a mix. You know, Africa. A lot of African countries already they didn't exist as countries, but they existed as various sizes of kingdoms and stuff, and they had their own languages and tribes. In Nigeria, there are 3 major languages, but there's almost
500 different types.
Yeah, there's a lot of languages
tribes
in there.
Yeah.
And I was gonna say that with some countries, so like in Gambia or let's say like Sierra Leone, it's also this stuff where they have English might be the main spoken language because of colonialism, but some of them have still managed to retain their traditional language. Yeah. And with North Africa, it's just, you know, migration is something that's always happened, right? And there was a time Alexander the Great also invaded North Africa. You know, maybe he slept with some people there. The Arabs have invaded North Africa before they took over. So there's a lot of, especially North Africa's had a lot of mixing going on. So that's why I would say there's always more lighter skinned people. And some of them consider themselves Arabs. Why? Because the Arab has a better image than the African. All of it is colonial mentality because they're trying to avoid being seen as African.
Yeah, but I was talking more because, for example, I don't know how many tribes there are in Nigeria, right? There are loads of tribes, right? Well, like, for example, if the British didn't come, you guys will have like maybe 20 countries within one country, right?
Exactly, that's the point.
That's my thing. So, for example, if you look at, let's say, Europe, every country has their culture, their borders, their things like that, man. If you look at Nigeria, bro, those are some pretty straight lines, right? Those borders, insane.
Exactly. Like there's so many tribes. Like, I think even just from like the southwest part alone could be a country on itself. Like, I'm not saying we should make it a country.
No, but that's not the point. But why not? Like, why all of a sudden? Because right now, I know we're stuck in this thing. But in the ideal world, wouldn't it be better, like, for example, for some countries to split up and then create their own image within a country?
100% facts. I think it's very paramount today, even when it comes to like elections and voting and stuff. I think tribalism is a huge thing. Like, most times, most people would just rather vote for the person from their tribe because they believe that, you know, he would do more things for their group. So, and not necessarily vote for the best person who could be the best for the role.
Yeah. So in Nigeria, we had elections maybe like last or 2 years ago, and it was an election that we really could have used it as a turning point because the country was inflation was rising, the currency was dying, and foreign exchange was getting so terrible, and it ended up being a 2-horse race between a guy from a tribe called Igbo and a guy from a tribe called Yoruba. And despite the fact that the Igbo guy clearly had better plans for what he was trying to do, he was younger, he was more vibrant, it all at the end of the day came down to tribalism. They were literally people from the first tribe be like, why are you not voting for this guy from your tribe? Why do you want to vote for that tribe, etc.? But I think that tribalism is a product of colonialism. Why? Because if you think about it as, you know what we call the food chain, maybe we put up a picture of a food chain here. The point is that the Europeans, because of colonialism, because how colonialism was set up is they ended up taking all the resources, or not all the resources, but most of the resources at the time, and in exchange for claiming to provide structure and control or whatnot. And it resulted in, when there's less resources, I don't know if you guys have watched Fallout, but when there's less resources, humans will claw at each other and will try to faction to be able to fight for what's rest. So it created, I think one of the byproducts of colonialism was it created tribalism, like a dog-eat-dog effect. I'm not saying we're all living in wonderful peace and harmony and blah, 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 but the colonialism made the competition more intense because there's less resources to compete for in their own countries. But I have a very, very controversial thing to ask the both of you.
Okay.
Well, a few in a row, but let's start with this first. Would you consider settler Africans as Africans? If not, why? And if yes, why?
As in,
So let's say you meet a guy, he's from Namibia.
Yeah.
He's a first generation German, so he still has his German passport, and he lives in a secluded German community, which are direct descendants of guys that never left Africa. Do you consider those people African? If yes, why? And if no, why? And then I also have some things to say, but I want you both to go first.
man, I ain't gonna lie. It depends, bro. Like, it really depends. But to me, like, if you're African, innit? Like, yeah, of course, you might have a German passport, or you might not be from, you might not have lived there, or you might not have, been there before. But I think if you're African, it's easy to tell. Like, I would still consider them Africans within their own right. But yeah.
Yeah, I think as long as you're part of the land and stuff. Like, for example, the South African Boers, they're still like they're South African Boers, and
Like the farmers and stuff.
yeah. No. But no. For example, the Dutch and English that stayed after. So in other words, they're like fourth or third generation, but they've been there the whole time. You see, for example, you look at the South African rugby team, and there are a bunch of them in there. I'm just saying, but they're still different type, man. They are Africans in the sense that they are born there, but they're not Africans in the sense that they have the same things happening against them. They live in like a little
Secluded.
African,
A
bubble.
a little
Bubble.
bubble. Because I think if Elon Musk was like from Nigeria, do you think he will make it?
No.
Elon Musk 100%.
Because he's South African, right?
Yeah,
he's
South
South African.
If he was like black,
Bro,
Nigerian,
nah,
he
he
wouldn't.
wouldn't be Elon Musk right
Elon
now.
Musk,
No
no.
chance.
So you think his whiteness helped him out?
Yeah, for sure, 100%.
He also grew up in a very privileged community.
But that's what I
so
mean,
he
right?
had more access.
Yeah, so in other words, if you like I'm not saying, but there were also like other people who are, let's say, still black and they're like in, for example, Nigeria, but they still live in a bubble. Do you consider them African then?
Yeah, I mean,
But then what's the difference between them and the white ones then?
I think the difference is that the ones you just mentioned, they can't lean into anything else when anything goes rough. So for example, this guy that I'm saying, he can claim to be German. If something goes left, he can like move to Europe and immediately, like a guy who moves to Europe from Namibia is not viewed the same as a guy who moves to Europe from Namibia and he's black. Even if they grew up in the same community, one will be seen as, I don't know, maybe he's trying to come for a better life or whatever, which should be fine. But in these cases, it will be like, oh, like the Namibian guy will be seen as someone who has, I don't know.
So you're saying the way the world sees you makes you more African than someone else. So it's just like, for example, you're saying like all these prejudice stereotypes. If you're like, for example, black, this, that, you're more African than somebody who's white.
So
Because you don't have any escape way.
yes,
I think
you.
if you don't have
I'm
like
saying,
a way out.
Yeah, I'm saying if people can find, if there's a way to wiggle out of being it, I think they would use. Okay, for example, if they line people up and they say, if you're African, we'll shoot you now, and there are like 10 people, and one of them is this guy. Do you think he's gonna claim to be African at that point, or it would be like, oh, like my grandparents are actually from Germany, blah blah blah. You know, what do you think about
No,
that?
I'm gonna do. What about, for example, we have African American.
Yeah.
We have, for example, South African white Boer. Who's more African? This South
I think-
African grew up in Africa,
I think the white Boer is more connected to the African culture,
but the world
but
doesn't
has
see
less.
that way.
Yes,
Doesn't
but the
see
world
that
doesn't
way.
see that way,
The
and
world
he has
doesn't see that way.
he has less to lean on. If they were like, if they were in a room, they would want. Most people want to say, oh, the African American guy is African. But the truth is, the Boer guy is more African than the African American.
but I think it also like depends on what context. So is it African just solely based off of looks, or is it African solely based off of mindset, or this or that? Like, I think if you put a African American and a South African white person here, based off of looks, you definitely say African American is more African than the.
Yeah. So now it comes to like being black, right?
Yeah.
To a
Yeah.
certain extent.
I think because what we just
'Cause
mentioned,
I look Arab as fuck, man.
I
I'm not
honestly
gonna lie,
still
man.
disagree with this. But okay, first of all, let me give my opinion on the whole white settler African things. Is I think for most of them it's fine, but if they were direct descendants of like people who were involved in colonialism,
But you can't
I
like
don't
you
agree.
can't blame the next generation for your like.
no, you can't blame them. I can't force them to go anywhere. I'm just saying like,
Because from a neutral point, because my mom is white,
yeah,
her probably I don't know. Like I know her like ancestors were probably
There's no way-
teachers, poor
yeah.
fucking farms and shit like that. But if they, for example, came from let's say a colonial place, bro,
it's
why
true.
should
You,
I, should
yeah,
I be blamed for
you,
that
you
shit?
can't. No, you can't be blamed. I'm not saying blame them. I'm not saying
not
blame
blame,
them.
but then you lose credibility or what?
I don't know. You know, it's just I don't know if it's I just don't know if it's disrespectful to the people who suffered during those times. So for example, if I don't know how it happens, but if I was someone who was a settler and it was from like settler as like not just like a regular worker or something, but like let's say you had a factory and used to enslave people and flog them. Like I think out of shame, when everything changed, I would just pack up and go away.
Just go.
But this is not how the world works. I think being African is not just based off of looks. There's also like, most Africans are warm. Most Africans like to dance, all this kind of stuff. There's still, and
Yeah,
even
there's
white Africans, you see they have this too, right? But there's also the fact that there are people. There's also it's weird, but there's a global kind of understanding of
Of what
African.
African is, right?
You know, the other day I was in a pub, and it was this old like pub crawl kind of thing, and there's a guy who came up to me. He says, it was Jenga. So I made a mistake in pulling out the Jenga, and I said, wait, what are you, African? I'm like, but I was from. He thought I was from L.A. right? Because the other people were from LA. So in a sense, when he said that, it was supposed to be a diss. And I said, oh, like, well, I'm actually African. And then he starts to apologize. But here's what.
Was he
here's
white?
what.
Was he white?
No, he was Arab.
Arab.
But here's what. He was using African in that context as an insult for doing something stupid or like being dumb or something.
Damn.
And I'm just trying to say that
Punch some
with what I was saying with all the countries like North African countries, some East African countries where they're trying to distance themselves from the image of like the West African or the West African is the image of the African, right? So it's down to this whole distancing themselves from the image of African, whilst they wouldn't claim. Don't know how we put this. Anyways, let me stop this. My other question was one more thing. My other question was, do you think colonialism halted development? And do you think that if there was no colonialism, we would have invented our own things? Before you answer this, think about this. Where was fire first invented?
Fire.
Fire.
Where was it invented?
As humans, we don't know. Two guys just struck stones together and made fire. And I think this happened in different parts of the world.
Yeah.
So if this happened simultaneously, other things would have been developed simultaneously. And I'm wondering if at the point in which Africa was met,
Yeah. To be honest, continue.
if colonialism ended up halting our development.
To be honest, I think the way to frame that question is not colonialism, but if probably because we have to go way back, bro. I think this colonial stuff started like maybe in the 19th century, but before that there was slavery and all that, right? Because if you look like way back, we had the kingdom from Mali. I think we had also other kingdoms.
First library in the
area as well.
first university in the world was where Timbuktu, right?
Exactly. So we had all these thriving African nations, right? They were doing really good, right?
Yeah.
But for some reason, like the rest is history. So I think we have to go way back to that point and then ask, okay, if this didn't happen, how would we look today in society?
Okay, fair enough. Then maybe a better way to phrase it is, since colonialism already happened, do you think that it would have been better for it to just continue, or did the way colonialism end abruptly? Did it damage the fabric of these countries? Because let's give an example. Idi Amin, when he was in Uganda, when he was a dictator, brutal dictator, right? One day he just woke up and said all Asians must leave this country in 2048. I'm not joking. in 48 hours, all Asians must leave this country. So they had to abandon businesses and stuff. But because there was not enough time to transition, it ended up causing so much poverty. A lot of those businesses went under almost immediately because the people that were being replaced, people that were replacing the people who just left, didn't have the training, didn't have the understanding for what they were trying to take control over. So here's what I'm saying: is there that you think there should have been a better transition when colonialism ended, or should they have just redivided the country? So like Nigeria, for example, should they have just redivided it back into like, I don't know, six?
What it was before.
Yeah.
Six different nations.
I think that they couldn't because they already fucked up too much. So I think, like, for example, if you look at Nigeria, Kenya, man, they already forced a language on them. They forced almost everything. And if you, for example, look like, let's say in Somalia, Somaliland, that was like British, and the rest of Somalia, so I'm gonna call it like South Somalia, that was like Italian or something like that.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure. But then when Somalian land wants independence, because they are like now more like English than Somali, the rest of Somalia.
Yeah.
So I think that like I don't think they already fucked up too much for them to say, hey, you guys now draw your own borders, this and that. And I think they took, I think my problem is they took like too much away. So in other words, they took their company's expertise, everything, and then they left nothing. So then they said, make a democracy, but you have nothing to start off. We're taking all this away that you're used to. Like for example, you're used to your house, right? And then somebody takes away all the foreign furniture, and they say live.
Yeah,
It's like
It's a bit messy.
No, it's like you're not used to it. Like they already they gave you all the furniture and you got used to living in the furniture.
For like 100 years.
Exactly, and then they take it away. And I think, like, for example, what you said last time, I don't know, it's like you know how back in the day different like civilizations were on top of that. I think Africa was just unlucky that they got stuck with the British industrial era. Because when the British got industrial era, they got all these steam-powered stuff. They could actually go into the land and actually do it themselves. Because before that, they didn't have the technology to like take over the whole land. Because Africa was a crazy place, man.
Yeah.
So they used like village leaders and stuff like that to get them what they needed: spices, slaves, whatever they wanted. But then they all of a sudden said, "Look, I got a fucking gun. What you gonna do?"
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I got a fucking steam-powered fucking boat, man. I can go up and down without the wind. No, because they got such a big leap forward in technology that they could actually like bitch everyone around, which is messed up, man. And then Africans are like, holy shit, man. That guy got a gun, I got a spear, man. It's not gonna work out,
What are you gonna do
right?
about that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, you want to say something?
Yeah, but I can honestly rant about this thing forever, man. And then like, I think once Africans want their independence, that's a loss for most Europeans, man. They're losing their resources, they're losing this and that. They're not happy about it.
Workforce,
Yeah, man. So they say, you know what? We're dipping, but we're taking all this away. And then, for example, what did the French do? Say, we're dipping, but hey, use this currency. Hey, Niger, you guys got what do they use?
Deposit like CFA.
Yeah.
They used to deposit like 85% of their revenue with the French.
Yeah.
And then the French was in charge of investing it.
Yeah, but like, for example, their currency, like the SAFA, yeah, it doesn't stagnate as much as other African currencies, but it's based on what Europeans need, right?
Yeah.
So if you, for example, need inflation to increase how many jobs and how much people spend, so some countries need inflation to get the economy running, right? But you can't do that if it's based on a European country that has different problems. Think Europeans are going to care about what's happening in Africa? Bro, no.
You see, I was actually going to ask a question about that whole thing, because not to play devil's advocate and not to say that colonialism was a good thing, I think the transition could have been a little bit better for sure. But if you compare the economies of French colonized countries to English colonized countries, let's say for Ivory Coast and Mali and Senegal, like these countries are honestly in pretty good economical standpoints than, let's say, the Nigerias or the Ghanas or these other countries. Do you feel like probably the influence of France could be the reason why their economies are stabilized? Let's say how CFA is tied to the euro, for example, or how most of the GDP from Senegal, 85% of it is going to France, for example. Do you think that that's probably the reason why their economies are kind of good and these countries are improving in a way? Because, bro, Senegal and Ivory Coast, these are pretty good countries to live in West Africa. You gotta be honest.
I think they only seem like they're improving now because the countries that should be doing good with the resources they have are just in terrible shape. Like Nigeria has potential to be one of, like, I don't know,
Should be like Dubai.
top 10.
Man.
Yeah, I'm telling you, in terms of resources. So it's not just, I think that's a correlation, but not necessarily that it's caused because of that.
No, but it's like, for example, if you look at, let's say, Gabon, that guy, that dictator who was there for I don't know how long, man. The Western still did all the trading because they had oil and all that, bro. They were happy with this leader because he was like a puppet. And
Yeah.
I find that like very, they're massive hypocrites in my opinion. For example, they're like, oh my God, we're not gonna serve you. Throw sanctions on you and your country because we don't like your style of government.
Yeah.
But that dictator over there, bro, we love that guy. Man.
Yeah. So one thing, everybody, people like to be naive sometimes, but we're just trying to be real here. And I really think that people ignore the fact that in the 60s, 70s, even till 80s, a lot of the leaders who were trying to do something good, who were trying to fight against colonial powers at the time, even after they had left these countries, they either get assassinated. Like,
there's so many.
I remember, like, there was this guy
Whoa.
called Thomas Sankara.
Yeah, but even
somehow,
in Congo, what's the guy called in Congo?
Patrice Lumumba.
Yeah, Patrice Lumumba. That guy was just shot, bro. The
Yeah,
CIA just
like,
pulled up, man.
They used for Sankara, he made like a whole speech about not being reliant on colonial powers, how we have to build our own countries. Great message this guy had. They used his best friend.
But even look at like for example Gaddafi, right?
Yeah.
He was the same throughout, right? But all of a sudden
They painted.
He
He
did
tried
some-
to do
no.
like a.
Yeah, he did something that they weren't happy with and said,
Yeah.
"Oh fuck, you guys need freedom, man." But the people were much happier
Exactly.
with Gaddafi than how
It-
Libya is right
wh-
now, man.
When you look at it, it's crazy because they destroyed the whole thing. They killed Gaddafi without a plan
But that's
for
like,
fixing it.
but that's the reason for invasion is like,
Yeah.
hey, firstly we don't like your democracy, but before that it was completely different. It was like a dictatorship, yeah, but they were fine because they got something out of it. Once the person says, yeah, I don't get something out of it, they're like, fuck it, man, let's bring these missiles and all this
Yeah.
other shit, man.
So so a lot of people feel like talking about colonialism or racism is like victim mentality stuff, and I have a question here. So do you guys think that there's still a legitimate interest? I know, for example, for sure in the 70s and maybe through to the 80s, these incidents about assassinations, about betrayals, were definitely signs that some higher power, in quotes, was trying to
The
keep
Matrix.
all good leaders away from the top spots in these countries because they would be developing and would be less reliant on other countries. But where I'm going with this is that, do you think that countries like Singapore, because some countries they seem to have turned things around. So like India was once colonized, right? But India seems to be on the up. It's part of.
India's like a billion people, man.
Yes, India is
And that-
1.4 billion people.
I know, and if
You
you,
know-
put that as money, bro, for the Western countries, like if we do trade with them, it's much easier.
Yeah, fair
Then when
enough.
Africa is like, I don't know, what's the population of Africa, the whole continent? Bro?
The whole continent would probably be like 1 billion.
Yeah, that's a whole bloody continent, man, and
Yeah.
India itself. So I just think I think the Western world,
1.2 billion.
yeah, I think the whole world looks at Africa and everything else more as like, hey, little parts, not much profit, but India, let's respect them more because they have more money, more people, and all these other stuff.
Yeah,
man.
but they weren't always seen as more money. I think there was one time India was seen as like poor and dirty. and-
Definitely,
and all this
100%.
stuff.
But now Modi, for example, he's I think a Hindu rhetoric or so that stuff. He's like crazy to a certain extent in
Yeah.
what he says sometimes because he's very pro-Hindu, and he, for example, I think he pushes other minorities further
way.
down.
Yeah.
Well, I think the West is not going to do anything because he's so powerful and he has the whole country in like his
It
grasp.
supports. Yeah.
In Africa, there's always like problems, man. The amount of
Yeah.
tribalism we have everywhere, bro.
Yeah, which is a byproduct, as we mentioned. But so what I'm trying to say here is that, do you think that colonialism still plays a part in the underdevelopment in Africa,
100%.
or
Bro,
is
bro,
it
like
just an
let's
excuse?
let's be
Can
honest,
we
right? Like
use
let's be honest.
Singapore?
Like you and me, we're both from Nigeria. Like if Nigeria was in a pretty good state and the economy was good and education was good, but we would not be here right now unless we had a specific reason to be here.
I
bro.
mean,
Like, think
everybody's different.
everyone is
I'm
different,
a
right?
very I was
but
always
dude, like,
a traveler
let's be
kind
honest,
of guy.
like, how many of the Dutch students or German students do you see going to America, for example, to go study or going to UK.
Yeah,
Like-
100%. And this was how it was in the 80s or 70s before things kept progressively getting worse. So, yeah, I would say that it's definitely not an excuse, but there seems to still be the effects
Some
of
effects of it.
colonialism still affecting these countries till today. Of course, tribalism was one of these examples. But when people mention countries like Singapore and how they turned it around, Singapore is just, I don't know how many people exist in Singapore, but it's a very small land mass. And
Singapore has
But wasn't like
5 million, 5.7.
so just 5 million, bro. The size of Singapore. Please never. Okay, I shouldn't threaten anybody, but please never mention Singapore in statistics ever to me, man.
Why? So,
Singapore is just 5 million. The way people mention the whole Singapore story, you would think before I knew the size and the population of this country, I thought it was this like big country that managed to turn it around. Bro,
But
there are just 5 million people. That's like one small state.
but it wasn't like a special territory for the British or something like that, man.
It used to be a trade territory for the
Because it was
British.
the same thing with Hong Kong, man. I think the
Yeah.
reason Hong Kong became so big because it firstly the location and secondly it was like Western, so you got all the Western privileges for trade and all these other things, man.
Yeah. So
Oh, the thing. What was the first thing?
So I was asking that is colonialism still
No,
holding-
100%, man, 100%. For you look, if you look at Kenya, right, the not this president, the president before that was still the first president, man. I think the leaders they put into power still have the narrative like with corruption, pleasing the Western world and stuff like that, man. Because like I think the reason the West liked how Africa is right now is because the leaders they put into place back then, man. Because they still abide to the rules, such as like that's what I'm interested about Senegal, man. Because Senegal got this new guy who is pretty, who is young and who actually wants change, man.
Yeah, if he gets assassinated, then we
then we know.
But I think if you have all these leaders and parties that have the same rhetoric as back in the day, then they will always be, I don't know,
Some sort of
put
control,
put the Western country first, then themselves, and then their country, man. Because for example, like when you see like any of your MPs traveling, bro, it's insane. So many cars, so many things, and he's the Minister of Agriculture, man.
Yeah.
Like what's happening there, man?
That's true. But to be honest, like just to touch on what you said, right, about asking the question, I think we have to be honest, man. Like most of the assassinations that happened, like in the 70s, 80s, 90s, like these things happen in succession, man. Like I'm not trying to make up any sort of conspiracy theory, right? But if you notice, everyone that has tried to oppose the power of the West, or at least wanted to improve the country in a better way, has gone down, in my opinion. And it seems like there was some sort of, I'm not saying there's a matrix controlling everything, right? But it just seems like there's something sort of silencing the voices and the things that are there to help people. But it is what it is.
Yeah. So
By the way, just to jump on that, it's also happening like in South America. If you ever search like CIA assassinations of leaders in South America, of how many coups they did, bro, it's insane, man. I just think the Western power is just like controlling all these countries for, I don't know, for their own benefit, man. It's after the Cold War, they are like the strongest country in the world, and they're just flexing, man.
yeah. So I was gonna say that I'm gonna move to a different thing, but before I do that, I was gonna say that we probably should make an episode on its own about like the image of a black guy or like the African
image,
you know, lookism. We need to do that.
For African in the Western country.
Yeah, exactly. So, but here's what we've talked about this.
Yeah.
How can people, as a people, how can various African countries decolonize? That means like stop viewing essentially European countries on a pedestal, stop viewing, you know, why in African countries in the news they're still mentioning Palestine, Israel stuff, they're mentioning Ukraine stuff. Those are valid stuff, but it should only come after other African issues, like let's say there's a war going on in Congo. I almost never heard anything about that. Why am I hearing about Ukraine first without when it's the opposite? They don't care.
They don't care.
I don't think in Ukraine they will talk about Congo or anything. So why is in Congo maybe the news is talking about Ukraine war? It makes no sense. It seems that is only happening because they're being put on a pedestal.
Yeah.
And definitely the whole thing about the image of African folks is very valid, because when you see how the Ukrainian refugees were treated versus other places, that's fair enough. But that's another thing on its own. The thing I really want to talk about before we finish off is about how the people like stop viewing European countries on pedestal, stop viewing white people on pedestal. I don't do that, but like, you know, we've given so many examples here about how when we were growing up we saw it, and it's still prevalent till today. And stuff like bleaching and the side effects like tribalism still shows. But how can we remove this as countries, and where can we go forward? But before I say that, what you guys have said about how the whole assassination of presidents and whatever, how you know it's so valid is every time there's a smart guy and a foolish guy running for president, somehow the smart guy always loses, and the stupid guy that seems like it's easier to manipulate. I'm not even joking.
No, it's true, bro. Like it's actually really true.
In my country, the last few elections have ended this way. The less intelligent guy somehow gets the position.
Yeah.
Why? Is it because these people are easier to manipulate? It will seem that way. But also, is it because it fits with the image of, oh, like African guys not smart, you know? Because I remember we once had a president that he was stuttering. They would ask him questions about cars. He would stop talking about robots, and you know, it's like, bro.
Yeah, now you're right for sure. But I think just to touch back on the question you asked, like one way to decolonize. I think honestly the biggest thing is just trust, man. Like first of all, open all the borders, bro. Like of course I'm not the smartest person out there, right? Like of course there are a lot of things to figure out about trade and security and all that. But I think once African people can have a trust of each other, I think that's the starting point. Like, I wouldn't lie. Like, if you, like back then when I was in Nigeria and stuff, I would rather order something from outside than probably go to the store and get it from the next person, right? Because my idea on my mindset was that if it's made in America or made in China, it's better because they have better equipment, better people. But that's not necessarily the case all the time.
But even you can buy drip at the flea market where everything's secondhand from Europe.
Right?
That's insane, bro. You go buy secondhand clothes from Europe just because at the flea market or we just call it the market, bro. I just found that wild, man.
It's
when you
insane. Like 10 euro shoes from the flea market here will be seen as something that is like really valuable, like back home.
Yeah, man. People wearing fake Jordans.
Exactly.
Don't lie, man. The fake Jordans are there, man.
Yeah, indeed. So I think just having that trust and also just supporting each other in whatever businesses or whatever things they might have, I think that is probably the first step that goes to in decolonizing, or at least removing that mindset of, you know, white is right or outside is better or something like that.
Yeah,
that's my opinion.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with you. I think, to be honest, the whole world is now very capitalistic. Money speaks a lot, and I just don't think a lot of people are going back to Africa and spending money, setting up businesses and actually improving, because now I think the West has kind of kept the money in a bubble. And then I think once we get entrepreneurship, businesses and all these things running in Africa, things will be working much better.
Before I talk about like how I think we can decolonize, I think the main thing that's killing us in terms of prospering sometimes could be copying without context. So for example, people trying to innovate in African countries, which is supposed to be how countries grow, right? New ideas being flourished and spread to as many people as possible. It's very hard for that to happen when, for example, there's no light. Imagine running a business and the electricity goes out. Then you have to use generators and the framework.
On that thing, man, what was Akon supposed to do, bro? I'm still waiting, man. Akon was supposed to do something.
Akon was a scam.
Build this crazy city or something in Senegal.
They wanted to build Wakanda.
Yeah, nah, man.
But
Akon in that, bro.
But really, the framework that is what all these countries build these companies on. You know, imagine Uber. Uber couldn't work if, let's say, in one area of the city there was no internet or something. You know, like the guy would just go into one zone and his phone goes out. Like, bro, like Tesla wouldn't work if there are not enough charging spots
Yeah.
around. There's so many examples of these things where certain foundational problems have to be solved before we move forward.
Into that,
Problems we're trying to be here and here when we've not solved here. Simple stuff like just good roads, electricity,
But do you trust?
widespread internet.
But do you trust the current government to do that, man? Because that's the thing.
Here's
right?
what, because they've kept using this whole mentality of clawing at each other. It's become that government positions are seen as places that you get in to quickly make some money and steal as much as
But
possible
that's the thing.
and go away.
Yeah, I think with, like, for example, I'm not an expert or anything. I think the best way is to, like, leave the government alone and start privatizing stuff in Africa. Because if it becomes a governmental level, man, it's not working.
Yeah,
at all.
but I've witnessed where private companies are trying to bring change and improve the neighborhood or improve the area, and the government will stop them. So, for example, an example of this is Shiloh happens in every December every year, and there's a town in which this church, it's like a church, small church town, and there's a big road to it, but the road was damaged, and the church offered to build the road because the government wasn't doing it, and the government said, no, you can't do it, but give us the money and we'll do it. And they gave them the money, but they didn't do it. So it's like, because the government has sovereign power, at the end of the day, they can just overnight decide to crush the private company. One more thing I'm gonna say is,
you're jumping from question to question, man. I
no,
know we have
I'm not
time,
jumping. I
bro.
just want to finish I just want to talk about this whole how we can improve, because we've lamented so much about the effects and whatnot.
Yeah.
It's only right that we talk about the good parts too, or how we can change. And building trust for sure is one of the biggest things we have to do.
With the government, though.
No, yeah, even with the government and showing. So the problem in Africa is that people at the top get away with too much, and it's almost like an insult. So, like, somebody says he's a Senate president and he stole, no, he didn't steal, but let's say 200 million swallowed by a snake. Like, we are not stupid, The guy is publicly insulting us, and if in these countries from the top these people were shown that, oh, like, you'll be thrown in jail if you mess up or if you steal, then it sends a warning to other people. But because people at the top who are committing crimes or being shady don't get punished, it only allows more corrupt people to try and get to that top and continue that trend. So building trust and punishing people who are doing wrong at the top is one of the ways to build. And solving foundational problems like electricity, good roads, slowly we can start to build trust. When my parents were growing up, my mom used to tell me that when she was growing up, that there wasn't always this lack of trust, that people would go to the markets. I'm talking like very small towns. People who go to the markets, the product is left there. You go, you drop money, you take it away, and nobody will steal it. That's a high trust environment. And it's that high trust environment that allowed Europe, in a sense, to get to where it is, even though Europe now is starting to get affected even more. And apart from, sure, colonialism, but the fact that you can book food. So now I call Uber and I say, oh, I'm gonna pay you 20 euros to get me rice from so store. The fact that I can trust is going to be delivered without some guy eating my food. I'm not even joking. Do you think in Nigeria there's been incidents about how they try to do this whole delivery stuff? The delivery driver will eat.
Bro, that guy's going home straight away, man.
I'm telling you, bro. or they loan money and they vanish. So, like, the fact that high trust is the only way to advance in that sense, because okay, now if I ordered food, what if the guy pisses or he spits in my food? Like, how do I know he's not gonna do that?
Exactly. Honestly, bro, you're right. I think if you look at China was exactly the similar way in this kind of mindset where there was no trust. But then what happened? Most of the people who were very corrupt were started being punished in public and then sentenced and then doing this and doing that. Now, of course, okay, now that is way too extreme, right? But that's way too extreme, right? But honestly, about just if we can find a way to sort of punish the people who are, stealing from the government or embezzling and doing all these kinds of stuff, I think it would set such a big example.
No, like if I do
for
it,
the people coming
like
up.
a shout out to, like, let's say Botswana, man. I think in Africa, I think is one of the few countries that actually like sets up a beautiful political system.
Yeah, they're growing.
Yeah, because they have like the good GDP, super safe. Everybody, I think, is doing pretty well there. They are using their natural resources very well. Corruption is very low compared to other African countries. But then if you say I don't like trusting a politician, I think that's because they say they will build a road. They will build it, and you'll see it. But then it rains, and the next day it's gone.
Yeah, because they skimped on it, so it's
Yeah, but
also
that's the
down to trust and not punishing.
And you know how many like presidential elections make these promises never come true? I don't know who this president was, but there's one who promised everybody new slippers or something
That's
after
kinda-
elections, and then they didn't get anything. But the thing is like I think that the promises and the trust in Africa is like we have like it's so false, man.
Yeah,
Everything is so
I
shady.
think people are already also traumatized at this
Yeah,
point
because
that
everything is
they
so,
can't trust any
No, but everything is
politician.
so fake. Everything is so like it's not real, man.
Yeah.
It's like your president, like the best roads in Kenya are probably made by the Chinese, Japanese, and maybe the British or whoever has a contract, man.
Yeah. If you give it to the Kenyan
but-
contractor, they'll feel like they will skim.
I don't want to like to say like the Kenyan contractors still have done an amazing job with some roads.
you don't wanna
man.
say
but it's
everybody.
like the process is long. There's always corruption. There's always something happening in between.
Yeah.
The trust is not 100%. But when
Yeah.
a foreign investor builds something, like they made our railways, bro,
Yeah.
that thing is like
Yeah, that's
smooth, man.
so what we need is to build trust,
But
right?
who are you gonna trust? That's the problem.
I
man.
think the people we can start to trust going forward are the people who don't claim. So if a guy comes and says, "I'm gonna give everybody rice or slippers," bro, that is so. I would never vote for such a person,
But
right?
like
But if he came and he said, "Okay, I will try and I can't do everything, but I will try and focus on this one project," and let's say this project is making sure the whole nation has electricity in 4 years,
yeah.
I think that's doable. But when they come and promise like 8 things, then you know it's not possible, and they're just lying to you.
I honestly think it's much deeper, man. I think
What
it's
do you
like,
think is much deeper?
Like the trust in Africa. Africans don't trust anything, man. Like, why do we live in compounds, man? Why do you have security guards here? Man?
Yes, exactly.
Like,
So
there's no trust at all. It's deep.
There's less
inside.
trust with each other.
And I don't know where did these compounds
I
come
think
from, man?
I think maybe it's an effect of colonialism. Maybe this lack of trust, because as I mentioned, but even during colonialism, I'm telling you, my parents, we could give my mother a call right now, and you know what? We don't. My phone is not here. Well, we could give my mother a call and ask her. You know, maybe I will clip it in. I will ask her, what was it like growing up, and was there more trust in your area then
That's a good
compared to
point,
now?
actually.
And
We should
why
do
is that the case? Why is this degradation of trust happen? I think it's because worse and worse leaders kept getting in power, and it only made so if somebody's corrupt and gets to the top, it makes other people corrupt try to get to the top.
Yeah.
If they
Like
see no
ripple
punishment,
effect.
and if everybody keeps cheating each other, skimping on money.
Can I ask you something, right?
Yeah.
If you, let's say, I don't know, Lagos or somewhere in Nigeria, right?
Yeah.
You see a beggar. Do you think, this guy's actually looking for money, or he's doing a business, man? Because in Kenya, sometimes you look at beggars and say, is this guy really a beggar, man?
I know what you mean, but there are also guys doing that.
Yeah, no,
here.
yeah. There's some people who scam it, but that's what I was saying. Like the trust is almost gone, man.
Yeah,
It's
the trust is
sad
gone.
that-
It's not almost.
There's like
It's negligible.
if you like doubt a beggar, man.
Yeah, that's
that's
kinda
next level. It's
depressing,
like that's.
yeah.
But not to also put this also on Africa, but if you also look at African Americans, for example, in the US, I think also this trust thing is also not really there. In a sense, right?
I don't think that's. I don't think, first of all, because we don't have any African American here.
Yeah,
I don't think we
also
can really speak for them. What we have is an external perspective. So, and things are not always what they seem like from the outside.
Just
But-
based on what I see in the media. That's
Yeah,
it.
but I don't think. But yeah, the media is terrible representation of life sometimes. But I really think trust can be built. It's just gonna take a lot of time, and it takes trying to
I think World Cup, the next one, Africa again, man.
Yeah, man. Really, if Africa hosted if there was an African World Cup, let's say, I don't know why, just that Nigeria's infrastructure is so terrible.
Remember last time you told me they stole the goalpost.
I'm telling you, bro. I'm not even joking, bro. There was one time in my area they put a goalpost there. They stole it and used the welding to maybe go make their own gate or something. But yeah, that's kind of depressing. But I believe there's change that can happen. Even though it might not, maybe it doesn't happen in our lifetime, who knows? But if everyone keeps vanishing, it doesn't really help. And if the only guys that keep getting in power are terrible people, then it doesn't help either.
I definitely agree. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the one of the last things is about how
Wait, real quick. Do you
Yeah.
think Nigeria needs a coup?
Hey, tread your
If
words.
if
Use
I-
your words wisely.
You're not gonna
I'm not even scared of anything, bro.
No.
But doesn't mean I shouldn't use my head. So I would say that Nigeria cannot be solved with a coup. Like, if there's a coup in Nigeria, then it's just another corrupt guy that's gonna take his place. So what is the point?
I definitely agree.
The problem is structural, not individual. It's not about who gets in. It's about a habit that's been formed over time of cheating each other. Habit that's been formed over time on skimping. When you can't trust, you know how many buildings collapse because people try to buy the cheaper ingredients or try to use less of the cement that they're supposed to use just because they're trying to steal as much money as possible, and then it results in people dying and whatnot.
So what you guys should do for next episode? You should rank African leaders. Like have
Bro,
a
that-
rank list. Like who had the best coup?
You know what? It's kind of sad that all the guys that, well, it's not all the guys that had
Most
that
of
were
them.
involved with the coup. The good ones died, but there were ones where when people died, they celebrated. Like Abacha. Abacha stole so much money from Nigeria that when he died, my mom said when he died, people knelt down, they were crying, they were
Bro.
celebrating.
Oh my god.
Can you imagine someone dying, people celebrating like it's World
Oh,
Cup, bro?
Nah, you're right. But just to touch on the things, I think my advice for Nigerian politicians that make all these big claims, like honestly, instead of focusing on you want to solve this, just focus on one fundamental thing. For example, electricity. For example, if you can, let's say in 2 terms, in 8 years or 10 years, whatever the country has, if you can focus on just providing constant electricity for that whole for Nigeria or for example Ghana, for example, I think that would be considered a big win rather than putting your attention on different things, because I think the fundamentals, because if you can focus on electricity alone, that would open the door and the pathway for so many other things that we are lacking. Let's say, for example, you want to bring the electric cars or electric cars into the country. That would open the pathway for electric car chargers and all these things and all that. Like it's like a little ripple effect. It just goes and goes and goes on. So instead of trying to focus on so many different problems, just try to fix just one. And if you can, that's already a big win.
Remember those days you're eating dinner then?
The light goes.
Yeah,
like,
man. And then everybody goes outside to check if it's just you or it's
Exactly.
everybody, man. And then you just and then
Nah,
they put on
it's
the gas
crazy.
lamp. Everything goes on, bro. And then
No, I remember like when I first moved to Sierra Leone when I was 7 years old, because my mom was from there, and it was 2007. And I think for about 7-8 months in a row, for the section of where we were living, there was no electricity, dude. And I was 7 years old at the time, right? And then just out of nowhere, one day there was electricity for like 2 minutes, and everyone was jumping and shouting. It's like, yo, there's light. Like,
Bro.
it's crazy. Like,
Bro, I know, like, it's crazy that we still struggle with these problems, but 100%, like, when I was growing up, I was one of those kids when they bring the light, you jump up for joy and go around. But, you know, these are not problems that we should still be having. It's almost like Nigeria should make a theme park called, I'm not even joking, Nigeria should make a theme park called 30 years in the past. So if you want to know what life was like before electricity was constant, you could just visit Nigeria.
Well, it's not constant
theme
now,
park.
right? Or is it?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying if someone that lives in a place where everything is good wants to know what it's like in the past.
Well, it comes with
They should
benefits,
visit it.
man.
The
My
thing-
social, I became so social. I knew how to talk to
you're
people.
forced to
man.
become social.
Conversationing, man.
Yes,
You
you're
talk
not
to
stuck
people.
online the whole
Yeah,
time.
you know your family, man.
100%. I
You
agree.
solve issues, man. Like I was pissed at my
100%.
sister once, bro. The power went off. There's nothing else
You
to do
force-
but to
yeah,
talk
you
to
have
each other,
talk
bro.
to 100%.
I was so pissed at her, but we just had to talk because there's nothing else to do, man.
Yeah.
that's kind of true, actually.
Well,
So
you
need a, in your
you guys see-
blackout.
you guys see lastly, do you all see it changing soon? Do you think that in our lifetime that Africa as a whole can be respected? Do you feel like colonialism is something like the colonial mentality can go away, where like people, there are people that have terribly low self-esteem as Africans, like just because they're African, anything happens, they're like, oh, is it because I'm African? Or like they
Start blaming it on the
or they feel scared to go into certain places because they feel like they would be rejected just for being African, or You know, just like a mental block where,
Yeah.
you know, these people who are bleaching all this stuff, you feel like that can fade. Do you see that improving with our generation? And do you think that can fade in the long run?
100% for sure. I think honestly, I do see change, especially like I'm from Nigeria, so I'm gonna mention all what I see. Right, I think one of the biggest like the biggest tech startups, like the scene, it's very very big in Lagos, especially for example. And there are so many kids and there's many people who are like 18, 19 who are like making a living for themselves with those different projects. I have lots of friends, lots of people who are involved in that scene and they're really doing good for their lives. And not just Nigeria as well. I think it's also happening in terms of entertainment, in terms of music. Like we're actually putting a good press for Africa in general out there. So I do see things changing, especially for the future with this younger generation. Now, in terms of the government and all the things they promise and this and that, honestly, I do not see it happening in my lifetime because it's gone so deep that it's so hard for you to get out of that rut. Right? It takes generations for these kind of things to be fixed. But especially for us as youth growing up, about embracing our African identity, about not being too negative about our expressions and our perceptions, I think we're doing a pretty good job at that. And I hope and I know for sure it's going to get better from now on. I think in terms of the press or in terms of how Africans are perceived, I think it's really getting better. And what you see in media, like for example the TV shows and all that, it's definitely getting better in my opinion.
Yeah, I second that, man. Like the government thing, I also agree. I think that's so deeply rooted that it's gonna like take ages to fix that and to flush them all out. But I think with technology and all those other things, you see like all these African startups and all these other things popping up and also becoming more mainstream with music, movies, and everything. Like I'm a piano man, Afrobeat, bro. Everybody's listening to Burna Boy these days, man.
Exactly.
10 years ago, I would have never said, man. There's a higher chance we listen to someone else, man.
Yeah, I really respect that so much, and I know this is something that could have probably gone into an earlier segment, but there was a time when I was growing up where people felt like it was cooler to listen to foreign music rather than Nigerian music.
Right.
And when
Uncle listening to
I'm
like
telling
country
you.
or something.
Yeah, man.
And when Nigerian artists, for example, would become very popular and they had to break into an American audience or British audience, then they start to have use like this kind of accent to sing, and it just doesn't work the same way.
Like, bro,
then it loses the essence of that like African part in the music. That then it sounds like a white guy trying to make African music, just doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
And now I really have a lot of respect for someone like Burna Boy, who, even though despite all his antics, one of the things he really tried to do was be unashamedly African in the way he made his music. So when he was blowing up, he didn't try to start singing like an American or try to start singing like a British person just so in hopes for them to understand him more. He just presented himself as it was. And funny enough, you're walking around, you see like the whitest girl ever singing Burna Boy lyrics and stuff. So like
I see that like in their playlists and stuff. Like I was watching an interview like a few days ago, I think, of two Nigerian artists, Buju and Ruger, right? And these guys were speaking in the most Nigerian accent. It was for Apple TV or something like that. And I was like, damn, like 10 years ago, this would have never been the case. You would have seen them forming,
Definitely.
like trying to speak European or something.
But even back in the day, my dad wanted me to speak as British as possible, man. I think once I said, even like writing I used to like spell color without the U.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's like, nah, man, this is wrong. You have to write like I think back then you had to be exactly like textbook similar to them in the way you act, the way you speak. Now the identity is kind of coming back.
If you look at the like past leaders, so 60s prior to that, maybe like Nigeria, for example, we have different old presidents and this thing on our notes.
Yeah.
If you listen to their interview, bro, they had the most British
Really?
accent. Bro, I'm telling you, they didn't sound Nigerian at all. They just looked Nigerian. But they sounded like they went to like a royal school or something. It's crazy because you don't even expect it from the way they look.
I know. I think the biggest indication maybe advertisements, man.
Yeah.
Now they're becoming more like
More African.
more African, more this, and then all the the proper similar Western type. It's not there anymore.
So I think that's really improving. Even though I know there was a time where in the adverts, it's only like light skinned girls they want to use for the adverts and all this stuff. But it's starting to change. I think definitely it can get better.
For sure. Like
And
in
we'll
terms of
see.
acceptance, I think it's really getting.
I really hope
Okay, yeah.
African countries too can, there's some African countries already doing well, but the ones we expect to do well the most, like Nigeria, is one of the most, I think it's the highest populated African country.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we're not, we're slacking.
Yeah,
But
man.
don't worry, vote for me for president. I'll run.
Hey!
In 40
You
years,
for
I'll run for
president?
presidency.
In 40
you can
years?
vote for me.
In
What?
40 years?
Yeah, I'll be like
Damn.
60 something, right? Yeah. I'll run for presidency. You can vote for me. All right, let's do it. Thanks everyone for watching this
Exactly.
video.
This is the longest
you-
podcast so far.
I'm
actually.
telling you.
Almost 2 hours.
Holy shit.
But if
Yeah,
you
bro.
watch to this point, please like and subscribe. We might cut this into 2 parts, but wherever you watch to, appreciate you. Thank you, Roch, for watching this. Yeah, if you enjoy this, please share this to someone who you feel would like to watch this, or someone who wants to hear what some African guys have to say on this perspective of colonialism. And yeah, thanks very much
Thanks
for watching.
again for coming
and
through
peace
to the
out.
podcast, man. Yes, sir.
Peace
If
out.
you made it this far, put Yuri for president 2060. Yes, sir.
2060.
I don't know, I guess 2060 or 2050.
2060 sounds right, though.
2060.
And if we're not in the picture, man, just know he did us bad, bro.
Exactly. Anyways, thank you guys for watching this, for making it this far, and we'll see you in the next episode.